weirdly enough, I think I almost was attracted to narcissists because I was so used to them. So, when something just is so familiar and something is so like, I guess the word is familiar. Something is so familiar that you almost don't even realize, you think it's the norm. And so you don't realize that it's actually not normal or that it's really like, it's really toxic. I think that was me. So today we're talking about why I attracted narcissists in my life. And I know that once you guys have seen this episode, it was already Christmas. So I really hope that you guys had a great Christmas and are having a great holiday season. I hope that this episode definitely helps you as you gear into a new year to just, again, reflect, do some introspection, and make those changes. All right, so a lot of people talk about narcissists and narcissism. This is really exciting for me because if you have seen my previous episode, I think episode one, or if you've known me from Orchids and Sweet Tea, you know that I actually studied psychology in college and I actually wanted to have a career in it prior to everything else changing. And so when doing this on narcissism is super like exciting for me because I get to kind of fuse, psychology in with scripture. And so, yeah. So, first question we have to ask ourselves is what is a narcissist? Now, I know that in society, we think of a narcissist as just someone who is arrogant or self centered. And while those are the core principles of a narcissist, there are other layers to a narcissist that makes it rather complex. And so it's not just someone who is arrogant or someone who is prideful or someone who is self centered. Like I said, those are the cores, but there are other layers and outside characteristics that make up an entire narcissist. The world often calls a narcissist a disorder, which it is, right, in psychology. But from a spiritual standpoint, a narcissist is actually a manifestation of a principality. And so, if you are not aware, principality is pretty much more of a high ranking set of spirits versus just individual spirits like spirit of lying, spirit of jealousy, that sort of thing. And so, most believe that a narcissist or narcissism is a reflection or just a manifestation of the principality of pride, which is Leviathan. And so, if you know anything about the enemy, you know that that's his core. Pride was his thing. He says that his children are the children of pride. And so, as you know, this is something that he uses quite a bit. And if you have not watched my previous episode, which is the fruits of the unholy spirit, I definitely go into a lot of the characteristics and a lot of the things that the enemy uses to, deceive and destroy and just to get us to trip up. And so this I feel like falls into, kind of like the fruits. But again, like I said, these are like clusters of fruits or clusters of characteristics. So it's not just one sole thing. But when it comes to just Google and just the, main definition of what a narcissist is, Google says that a narcissist thinks highly of themselves. They need admiration, believes others are inferior, and lack of empathy for others. And then they also go into saying that a narcissist has a sense of entitlement, often envious of others, but twists it the other way to make it seem like other people are actually envious of them. They are exploitive. They often lie. They lack accountability, so they rarely apologize. They're obsessed with the desire for success, status, appearance, and that sort of thing. The core is that self centeredness. The core is that arrogance, that pride. If you ever encounter a narcissist, you just know that everything is about them, even when they are appearing to be helpful or they're trying to, say that they're helping someone or they're doing something for someone. The core of their actions and their desires is self. So it always goes back to self. So it's never actually about other people, even when it appears to be that way. I think for me, this subject was super important to talk about. One, because I feel like we don't talk about these sort of things in the body as much as we should. I know that there's like so many other things in the Bible that we are to focus on. But like I said, with even when I did my episode on the fruits of the unholy spirit, I feel like there are just some things that we should have a general knowledge of, especially as it comes to the tactics of the enemy, the things that he uses, certain things that we can kind of, that can help us actually be more discerning. Because I think as a body of Christ, not only are we just Bible illiterate and we don't read the Bible, but we also, I think, lack a major level of discernment. And so I think, if we are only teaching on certain principles, but we're not teaching on certain things to help us be discerning, then, I think that's where we kind of see a lot of the chaos and the division and a lot of the tactics that we see in the church that doesn't allow us to be actually unified and in fellowship and actually operating in complete love. This, like I said, this topic is just like super personal. I think because, like I said, I'm going to talk about why I was attracting them, but I think it's just because I've gone through so many, I want to say I've gone through so many experiences with narcissism that it has been it has been a very, what's the word I want to say? It has been very transformative in my way of thinking, but also it has been really like major life lessons for me as it relates to just the levels and just the types of relationships that I've dealt with. And, just again, looking back now, thinking of it from the spiritual standpoint and not just the carnal way of just like, handling a narcissist. So yeah, so it's definitely helped me a lot in my journey, my walk with Christ, especially this year as I've just like, I've been really digging at like generational foundations and just really doing a lot of introspection, making sure that I'm, looking at the people in my life and just the core self of who I am and like what has been the things that I needed to change as I've gotten closer to the Lord. And so, yeah, so this has definitely been one of the areas in which I didn't realize that I was a repetitive victim in. I think I almost weirdly enough, I think I almost was attracted to narcissists because I was so used to them. So, when something just is so familiar and something is so like, I guess the word's familiar. Something is so familiar that you almost don't even realize, you think it's the norm. And so you don't realize that it's actually not normal or that it's really like, it's really toxic. I think that was me before, like going through, like I said, like going through deliverance and just renewing of my mind and just really getting serious and consecrated with Christ. I really thought this was a norm. And so I almost was low key, I think, attracted. And I'm going to share like the parts of myself that I realized attracted it because there were some shared characteristics, which if you're not aware of your own self and the things that you have to clean up and the things in your heart that you have to clean up, a lot of the times the enemy's tactic will be to like use those very things, those very desires, or, those very things within your heart to actually draw you further away from what the Lord wants you to be. And so I think that was kind of the case with me as it relates to, I think it was really just the pride part of it. I think I just really didn't know. Again, this year is kind of one of the years I discovered that I actually was prideful in a lot of ways. And so I think that pride part, as you know, because the narcissism is like a manifestation of the principality of pride, then of course, if I have pride in me, this is a principality of pride. Of course, it's going to kind of be a magnet, right? And so I realized it was like the pride that really drew me to people in my life that were, I consider narcissists. And so, interestingly enough, I never really saw myself as like a vain person. Like I was like into vanity and those kind of things. But I do think there were parts of me, especially the parts of like the pride that had lust, which were like more so the pride of life, the lust of the eyes. So like if I'm one that likes quality and nice things, right? Not to the degree of sitting back saying that I prefer labels and things to validate me, but it is a matter of just like really liking high quality things or things that I find nice because I'm just creative at my core. And so when I see certain designer things, or it could not even be designer, if I just find that it's unique, it's innovative, it looks really good, I'm just drawn to that automatically. Visually, I'm a visual person. And so a lot of the times I follow like fashion influencers or like lifestyle influencers. And so I'm often like always looking and seeing like, oh, I really like that unique thing, or I like that unique thing. And so I realized though that there was like a core of that throughout my life prior to like this year and really learning about the consecration and all the things. There was a level of lust there. And so I didn't realize how much I actually actually, it wasn't just a matter of liking quality things or liking nice things. It was just a matter of lust. So if I saw somebody that had a lot of nice things, like I was more drawn to them in that way. Um, and I think when I just now think about it, just like when you just think about like generational things and just familiar spirits and those kind of stuff that the devil uses to kind of keep you constantly connected to the things of your generational foundations. Now looking back, I can see why I was always tied to narcissist or narcissism because of, coming out of my household, dealing with family members that were narcissists, just having that exposure for a long period of time. And so, again, like I said, you don't realize that things actually impact you, and that things actually do. Affect you in a way that you might not realize, especially spiritually. But also remember, we're triune beings, right? So there's body, there's soul, there's spirit. And so not just from the spiritual part of it, but also the soul part of it, also the, just in it, that affects your body. I just realized how much of a connecting piece it was from like where I came from, how I was brought up, and then also seeing that, like I said, I saw it, my warped vision, my warped way of thinking and belief system, seeing it as normal. And so when I dealt with it in my adulthood with friendships and other relationships, while it was frustrating in certain retrospects, in other retrospects, again, I felt like I was almost drawn to it and I was almost finding that it was normal and it was okay. So I was kind of going through these cycles of settling and putting myself through the harm of dealing with a narcissist, but at the same time finding some kind of solace and comfort in it because again, it's something that I've been used to and it's something that I kind of like am, I found normal. So that's basically, so how did it affect me? That's the question you have to ask yourself. If you've ever dealt with a narcissist or are dealing with a narcissist, how does it affect you? Now, you might think, okay, all I got to do is break ties with a narcissist and I'm good. But there are, I think, especially when we go through later on, just their cycles of abuse and how that works. There is, especially a psychological, I think, there's a psychological breakdown that happens to a person that is a victim of a narcissist. And so you have to know that it does affect you and that you don't just walk away unscathed. And so for me personally, I struggled to trust others. It impacted my ability to set boundaries without feeling guilty. I always second guess myself. I was always double minded when it came to setting boundaries because I didn't want to. I think that also tied into the people pleasing part of it, which is like I didn't want to necessarily have people not like me, no one be mad at me, not have people, want to accept me or not even need me. And then, like, really my ability to form and maintain healthy relationships. Like I said, like, if I did maintain or formulate relationships, they were oftentimes with narcissists. And so I always, again, found myself drawn to it from a standpoint of, like I said, the enemy's tactic of using familiar spirits, but also, again, just the parts of me that I didn't fix, which was the pride and the other things that just also like drew me to that as well. And, now looking back and again, like going through deliverance and just consecration and things like that, I realized, yeah, there was an accountability that I also had to take in it and not just paint myself as a victim, but also realize that, yeah, there were parts of me that, again, like I said, just were low key comfortable with it. So before we even go into the roots of it and all that stuff, I want to go into the spiritual part of narcissism. And so, narcissism spiritually is empowered by demonic spirits and connected to spirits that include Jezebel and Ahab, the spirit of delusion and insanity, the religious spirit, the antichrist spirit, the witchcraft spirit, the lawlessness and rebellion spirit, and the spirit of lying. Those are pretty much the groups of demonic spirits that really are the underlining of a narcissist. If you know anything about, I know a lot of people often talk about like, spirits and is there really a spirit of lying, a spirit of this, a spirit of that. We do know that these things are mentioned in the Bible. A lot of them are, especially as it relates to the spirit of lying. We also know with Jezebel and Ahab, they were actual people in the Bible. And so this is why we get that spiritual component from them. And when it comes to when it comes to Jezebel and Ahab, you can read First Kings, like chapter 16 through 22, really tells about their whole reign, all that they did, and even the death of Jezebel, all of the things. Jezebel, they considered an overt narcissist, and Ahab, they considered a covert narcissist. Now, with Jezebel, they consider her overt because of she was manipulative, she was vain, she was entitled, she was shameless, she was callous, and she was lawless. And again, like I said, you can go to First Kings 16 through 22 and really see all that she did. Like she did a lot of things, including killing people, a whole lot. And so then you have Ahab, King Ahab, and he, like I said, is considered a covert narcissist. And he oftentimes used fear, bullying, and intimidation. And like I think it was in First Kings, they actually mentioned him and said that they considered him like one of the most wicked kings. So it just shows you just how much of a magnitude that narcissism is, how dangerous it is. And so yeah, but if you just go into that, if you go into, like I said, read that in the Bible, you can really go into like in detail exactly what they did. As we know, Jezebel, she literally, God was not pleased with her at all. She died of a gruesome death, as we know. We've never even, I don't even think I've ever seen in the Bible, I haven't read the whole thing, but I haven't seen the Bible where God has really been adamant on the way that he's killed someone. And I think with her, she was actually pushed out by a servant out of the window, out of a balcony, and then she was run over, and then she was devoured by dogs. So she didn't even have any flesh left on the ground. So that just goes to show you how displeased God was. And I know that a lot of people don't talk about, like, people don't believe in like the spirit of Jezebel and all the things, but I believe it was in Revelations, if I'm not mistaken, that Jesus actually spoke about this to the church. And he's going to mention, he talks about like the fact that we have entertained the spirit of Jezebel for a long time. And so clearly, it just goes to show that even though these were real people, there are spirits of them or manifestations of them or characteristics that are shared by them. That's why we call it the spirit of Jezebel or the spirit of Ahab. It's because that spirit shares those same, qualities or characteristics as the actual people did. But just so you have a gist of, from a spiritual standpoint, what a narcissist actually is encompassed by. So it's not just one thing. And like I said, the arrogance and the pride is the core, but it's not the only thing. And so when you realize how complex it is, then you can understand their tactics and their cycles of abuse and why there are so many layers to it as we go further in. So yeah, so now we can talk about what is the root of narcissism. Basically, one would think because someone is prideful or because someone is arrogant, that the root must be that they're like spoiled as children or they're like super into themselves, or something like that, right? That they're like super vain, and there's degrees to that. But the root, actually, like surprisingly, the root is the complete opposite of how they actually portray themselves. And so the roots are no development of self. So this comes from childhood trauma. They're stunted emotionally. And so this is why you see they have no empathy. They're usually callous. They're usually, again, just thinking about themselves. They don't care about other people's feelings, whether you're sad, you're mad, you're frustrated, anything of that nature. They're just really more focused on them. It's almost like a sociopathic like, where there's like no level of emotion that they tend to like express when it comes to anyone else's, experience. They're not really moved by that. And there's degrees to that. So I'm not going to say they're like entirely cold. You might find some that might have a little bit of a response to their victim's negative emotion or feeling, but most of the time they actually don't. And it usually turns into like, anger or some sort of rage because you are not responding how they want you to respond. And so, yeah. And then the last root is that they only survive from attention and validation from others. And so they actually need attention, not because they find themselves attention worthy, but because they're very insecure. So again, like I said, the roots of a narcissist is actually rather opposite of what they portray and what they exude in terms of characteristics. Like I said before, there are two types of narcissists. And so we're going to go into the two types today. And so the two types, like I mentioned before, is overt and covert. Overt narcissists is actually someone that usually exudes characteristics like being loud, pushy, boastful, and arrogant. So, this is usually what we often see and we assume is a narcissist. But then, like I said, there's a second type of narcissist, which is covert. And that one is actually the opposite of the overt. And so, the covert actually comes across as nice, shy, humble, and charming. And this one is actually considered the most dangerous. They self deprecate themselves in order to get compliments or validation or some sort of attention and love. And these are all ranges of pride. And again, if you've watched my other episode on fruits of the unholy spirit, I go into the different types of pride. So just realizing again, pride is not centered on one manifestation. There's various degrees to it. And so this just shows you these are just ranges of pride when it comes to narcissism. But overall, narcissists, like I said, are deeply insecure. They're highly sensitive to criticism. They refuse accountability at all costs. And they believe the world is pretty much out to get them. That's just their whole gist of the core of how they think, their belief system. And so now, like I said, I go into really why was I attracted to narcissists. And like I said before, my own pride and my lust for things were kind of the shared characteristics of a narcissist. So I felt like those are what kind of drew spiritually from a spiritual standpoint and a soulish standpoint. And, it was just my idea or my belief that like success and material things were like validating. And so I think when you just look at the society today as a whole and just the culture we're in and just how much we kind of depend on a lot of things, material things, success, accolades, as a way to validate. Like now, even when we just introduce ourselves, we can't introduce ourselves without like our degrees or where we went to school or what affiliation we're affiliated with or, what businesses we have or, how much money we make or, the fact that we're a homeowner or whatever, like titles and all these statuses. I think you see that like we've really honed in on that as a culture. And I think that just further creates this sort of narcissistic way of thinking and being as human beings because everything is just about again self and validation and getting compliments and feeling like you're only worthy based on the things you have and or what you do. And so we see that recipe just kind of like all encompassing on social media, which is just another layer or another thing that further propels this narcissistic view. So as you can see, we're not really going in the opposite direction. We're actually going in the wrong direction as a whole. So now you are not surprised when you see there are so much more narcissists than there were probably even like, a couple of years ago or whatever. Um, and again, like I said, it's just a recipe for the enemy, a recipe for the enemy to use, right? Like I said, there's a level of pride and things that we're not killing because we're just flowing with the worldly systems and social media and all the things. And so it's really just the perfect environment for the enemy to just further infiltrate and further influence and further just, again, create more narcissism in the church. And so when you look at it and you see like Jesus mentioning it in the New Testament about like the fact that we tolerated Jezebel long enough in the church, now you can see why there's so much why he has to mention it because there's going to be so much of like this sort of spirit and principality that we see in the church, not the world, the church. And so this is something that I feel like is so important to talk about because again, we only can tolerate something if one, we either blindly turn our backs on it and say, I'm just not gonna confront it, or two, we are just ignorant to the fact that it exists. And so if we have these conversations, we can know again, like I said in my other videos, we can know, reject the wiles of the enemy. And so if we know about these things and we understand the breakdown of what a narcissist is, the spirit of Jezebel, spirit of Ahab, and all these things, we can be more diligent and we can actually go out and tackle these things and not have it go rampant in the church. Because that's the thing about the spirit of Jezebel, it's there to influence others. And so just like how Lucifer in heaven took a third of heaven with him, like that's the point of the Jezebel spirit and most demonic spirits is really to influence. It's not to for them to just be singled out and be like, okay, I'm just roaming here for no reason. Like the roaming is to gather more people, right? Is to gather more of an army. And so if you allow these things to just infiltrate the church, just understand that it's really just gathering more, wolves in sheep clothing. Like it's creating more of those versus actually creating sheep that we might follow Christ for real. And so those were kind of like the basis reasons as to why I was really attracted to a narcissist. And besides just those things, like I said, it was just a lot of generational things too. I just know, like in just my bloodline, there's just so many different things that like God revealed to me that was like foundational things that were spirits and principalities that were really influential in my life, but also just was like, again, trying to continue to be generational consequences throughout bloodlines. And so I think this is like one of the things that I've noticed was a thing in my bloodline as well. And so, like I said, I think that on top of just my own personal shared characteristics that I had, just really drew me to them. And what really made it tricky though to pinpoint was just, like I said, just their cycle of abuse and how it works. Because a narcissist they have a tactic that kind of reels you in, spits you out, then reels you back in, then spits you out, then reels you back in, right? So it's a very confusing, it's a real confusing tactic for the victim, which further again just keeps them hooked because or I would say what makes you hooked is that you're just, again, you become double-minded because part of you knows you don't want the negative things that come with, the cycles or the cycle of abuse that the narcissist gives, but then there's a part of the cycle of abuse that the narcissist does that you actually want or desire, because again, that's also their MO, to know what it is that you have need of, right? So that's the thing that also makes a narcissist really tricky but also dangerous, because they don't just go to random victims. They actually study their victims to know exactly what they need. And that's why I say it's very much demonic based, because the enemy does that, right? Like he knows us inside out, which is why he knows where to tempt, he knows what to do, he knows who to use, he knows what things to trigger us, he knows what things that we have desired in our hearts to draw us. That's what you get here with a narcissist. They're very calculated, they're very intelligent on like what their victims need and what they don't like and do like. They're very calculated in terms of how, again, they do their cycles of abuse. They know exactly when to like draw you in just enough, and then they know exactly when to kind of dispel you. And without you, and you feel that rejection, but you don't realize that they're actually dispelling you. Yeah, so that's what kind of makes it really tricky to pinpoint. So if you are ever in a relationship or around anyone that is a narcissist, don't if you feel within yourself that you might be around that but you're second guessing yourself, I definitely just recommend praying for clarity, because God will always give you clarity. Sometimes just stepping back to again reflect and do introspection within yourself, but also the situation and the person. And yeah, sometimes you just need that distance to be able to see too, because sometimes when you're just in the pit of something, you're not seeing it because you're clouded by the up close, zoomed in view of what you're experiencing. And so I definitely recommend praying and taking a step back and further seeing if this is what you're dealing with. Because if so, I highly recommend, going to God about what should be your next step. Because honestly, a narcissist is, like I said, like super dangerous because of just the level of just the principalities and the clusters of things, spirits that they encompass. And so that is just, again, just a very intense tactic that can be used on you in just an over time. Again, like I said, is a breakdown psychologically, spiritually, your soul, right? And so we don't ever want to be around people that are detrimental to our soul. When it comes to spiritual things and your soul being at risk, God oftentimes is taking into precedence your soul first. Because again, like he said, he wishes that you might prosper as your soul prospers. So if something is not causing your soul to prosper, God is like, I want you to rid yourself of things that are going to take your soul. Because again, that's all we got for eternity. The goal in the end is to make it to heaven. And so our soul has to be intact. Like I said, they have what I call cycles of abuse. And so there's a few that I'm going to mention and kind of break down what these look like. And so the first cycle of abuse would be considered love bombing. Now, I know that's a word that we often use a lot today, but in case you are this is your first time hearing about what love bombing, the word love bombing is basically just a tactic that people use to shower you with affection. In terms of, it can come through help, affection, gifts, praise, etc. It comes with a manipulative underlining motivation, I should say. So it's very manipulative. So it's not just someone who just loves you and is so like has so much affection for you that they just want to show you through showering you through gifts or helping you and all those things. Like this is actually from manipulation. And so again, like I said, with a narcissist, even when it appears that they're helping others, really and truly the motive is self. So they're really doing it for their own selfish gain, selfish motivation, even when it looks like on the outward that they're actually helping and assisting and loving others. Then there's devaluation, which basically is where they start to withdraw once you're hooked, and then they get bored or they gain superiority over you through your flaws. They dispel you once they actually hook you in. And so this is part of the devaluation. So this is kind of to make you feel inferior, to you to kind of second guess yourself, kind of have that low self-esteem, not really understanding yourself as a person. And so this is again where they get bored, so they do it, or it's because they want to be superior over you. So if you feel lower about yourself and you feel inferior, they get a chance to be that superior, self-centered being. The next tactic that they use is to discard. So now this is where they finally get rid of you or they push you away, and this is called reverse discard. So basically, it looks like you're the bad guy and not them. So again, because a narcissist, the whole point is for them to come out one unscathed, but also come out looking great, right? For them to be glorified and magnified. They, even though they're the ones that's discarding you, they do it in such a way that makes it look like you left or that you chose to walk away or that you gave up instead of them. So it's almost like they reverse engineer it so that they become the victim or that they look better and they don't look like the bad guy and it's you, right? And so some of this can even be through like gaslighting and things too, where they will, tell people, that you were super sensitive or you were this or you were that. That you were unstable in your emotions or, anything to just, again, make them look good and make you look like the bad guy. Then there's this another tactic called hovering. So it's basically like a vacuum. So they, again, after they've discarded you, so these are going in order. So remember, we first started with love bombing. So this is how they get you. They hook you. Then they devalue you so that you feel inferior. Then they discard you. But then there's a thing called hovering where, again, they vacuum you right back in. And so, again, they don't ever discard you so that you're way over there, like you've moved on with your life in such a way that you would never reconnect. They're going to discard you at a good distance so that when they're ready to, again, suck you back in, which is the vacuum effect of hoovering, they can pull you right back into their lives when they still find value with you. That's the cycle that they continue. And then once they do that, it starts back again with the love bombing. Then it goes back to the devaluation. Then it goes back to the discard. Then it goes back to the hoovering. And it continues like a washing machine, just continues to go in cycle after cycle after cycle. So when you think about those four things happening, and there's more, but I haven't really gone into all of them, but just think about just those four things happening over time, what that does to a person's belief system, their self-esteem, just their views on people, themselves, God, just the world. There's a lot of breakdown that happens from a psychological, spiritual, emotional standpoint. And so that's why I said it's so dangerous when you actually know someone is actually a narcissist. It's dangerous to, stay in an encounter with them because, again, like I said, there is a breakdown that happens. And yeah, like I said, it all repeats all over again. And there are, like I said, there are tactics within those abuse cycles of abuse that they actually use. And some of them are gaslighting, like I mentioned before, which is making you doubt yourself or making you doubt what you think you see or you hear or you feel. They lie, which is this is what they do to avoid accountability at all costs. Like they literally do at all costs. Like they rarely apologize. Then you have withholding, which is intentionally withholding what they know you want or need. So that I think will fall under like a devaluation and discard part of it. That cycle, I feel like that's where they can withhold because again, that's the whole point. It's almost like I'm loving you to hurt you, to love you again to hurt you, right? So that's where you get from the withholding, which as we know is abusive. So if you have people that do that on purpose, that withhold, whether that's like withhold emotionally, they do the silent treatment, or they withhold anything that they know you need when they have the power to do that, you are definitely dealing with a level of abuse. And so don't ever second guess that part of it. Then you have the monitoring. So this is where they want to keep tabs on what you're doing. So this usually will happen in the discard phase, which is like, again, they'll dispel you out just enough that they can still have access or they can still kind of keep tabs again to make sure that if you are of value still, they're going to suck you right back in because again, all of it is for self. Then you have the future faking, is what they call it. And this is where they talk about all the amazing things you would do together, all the things that, that you might have said that you wanted, that they promised that, is going to happen, but they never make it happen. So this is where people speak all words, no actions, right? And I can't tell you how many times I've actually gone through that to the point where I think now it has caused me to be so distrusting of people in what they say because I've just been so used to hearing a lot of, like Jamaicans would say, sweet talk. And you hear all the good lyrics, like they call it, where it's like you got all the great things that you can say but no action to back it up. And so I think I've been very conditioned to wanting to see people's actions more than even what they say. But of course I like to hear the affirmation part of it, though, what you have to say. But I think yeah, that has really caused me to be like super um I don't take the weight on words. So even in compliments, even in, promises, even in, I guess honor and praise, I take words more lightly because of the fact that again, I've been in this. And so I've seen where people have said a lot of things and didn't and never backed it up. And I went on their words and hung on their very words and then realized that like you were just literally again being fooled and future faked. So yeah, so then there's also breadcrumbing, which is when you withdraw or get ready to leave and then they give you just enough attention or time to keep you. This is where like sometimes they don't always discard you fully, but like let's say for instance you were, saying that you need communication and the person is just not communicating. And so you're like, you know what? This is not going to work. I'm going to leave. How they'll breadcrumb you is right when they see that you're like, oh, you're about to leave or you're really serious on not like continuing this. I'm going to give you communication to hook you back and stay. And then when you stay, I go right back to not communicating. And so that's like the level of breadcrumbing to keep you just like how you would do like birds when you see them put like breadcrumbs on the street. And so they also use control, which we know what control is, and they do that in every aspect of it, whether that's like emotionally, physically, psychologically, all of the things. Then you have the power dynamics, which is where they prefer to be superior and they have power over you. And this is again due to insecurity. So they can never allow you to have power. They have to be superior and in power and in control because, again, they're super insecure. So if they ever gave you that, that would ruin their whole foundation of like what they're trying to actually do, right? And then you have something else called stonewalling. And this is when you communicate issues within a relationship with them and they shut down and refuse to communicate. And this one, I think, has been in friendships especially that I've had in the past, this one has really gotten under my skin. And it's so interesting because you would think that, again, the whole point is thinking that you're in a relationship or friendship with someone, that there would be a concern or a care to want to communicate when there's issues, right? Because that is the point of any relationship or any friendship or any partnership. You want to communicate at all times. You don't wait until it's like detrimental or it's bad, that now you're like, we're running the therapy, or we're running to like salvage this. It's like if you communicate even in the smallest things, you kind of diffuse the bigger things, right? And so I've had friendships where this has happened, and when you want to communicate, let's say it's like, I'm not feeling reciprocity, or I'm feeling like every time we make plans you're canceling, or any little thing, and you want to have that conversation. I've had people who actually literally refused to communicate, like literally refused to communicate, and when they did, it was major gaslighting. And so like I realized that was one of the things that I kind of realized as I kind of just looked over previous relationships, friendships with narcissists, and I just was like, it's very unhealthy. And at the time, I think you're more drowned in the hurt than you are realizing that, oh, this is what's happening. Like you're actually like this is like you're being discarded, but in a way that makes you look bad. And I didn't know about like the actual in-depth cycles of abuse that a narcissist did, but now just looking at like the tactics that they use, like I was just like, yeah, this tactic is like is super hurtful, because I think you're stunned and you're shocked at the fact that, like, oh, this wasn't like, by the time you get to this, it's like this was not a friendship that you thought. Like you were the only person thinking you were friends. And so I think this is where like some people can get really I think you could break people to a point where they no longer, they have a bitterness towards friendships, or they don't want friends. And this is why I think sometimes you have that saying of no new friends, because we've gotten to this part where it's like I don't even want to deal with like the dramas and the intricacies and the distrust that I got to deal with people, because you just can't imagine that like folks will really pretend to be your friend, or will string you along almost to only feel like, oh man, like it was just me this whole time, like you actually weren't even like considering me a value, or you didn't consider me as a friend. It was really for your own selfish ambitions and desires. So yeah, so this one is one that I think, for me, like all of them are really crazy. I've dealt with all of them for the most part, but like I think this one was, I think, the most hurtful, because then as the person on the receiving end of being stonewalled, you don't get a voice, right? It's like you don't get to express your gripes and the things that you feel, that to advocate for yourself, or to at least just say like this is how I feel. And then you also don't get that respect to say, okay, I hear you. Maybe this is my perspective, or maybe this is my reasonings, and it's not what you think. It might be a different view, it might be a wrong view from your standpoint. But you don't get that respect, and you don't get that voice. And so it's almost like you kind of, you're walking in a room, and all of a sudden this brick wall just like drops right in front of you, and then you just hit your head, right, you hit your face right in the brick wall when you were en route to like walking down the street. Like that's how it feels when it comes to like the stonewalling. And so again, if you have gone through these things, like I said, pray about it, really look into like if these are real things that you're dealing with, because these are abusive. And so you never want to condone abuse in any way, shape, or form, because again, it chips away at you. Some abuses chip away at you over time, little by little, but best believe that after a while, it does affect you. It does, and it is already affecting you. And sometimes we don't realize it because we have all these defense mechanisms up, and we are just trying to think that if we ignore the problem will go away. And just understanding like none of that is true. It does affect you. Ignoring something does not change the fact that it's there. It does not change the fact that it's actually infiltrating you day by day. And so yeah, these are just some of the tactics. Of course, like I said, there's plenty of other tactics, but you can also, I also definitely recommend just researching on narcissism. There's tons. I think we're seeing an uprising in narcissists today, so I'm pretty sure there's a lot out there for you to read. But like I said before, I definitely recognize, especially in friendships, that this was a thing that I was dealing with. And it's funny because I actually this year did like this friendship this friendship kind of test where I kind of wrote down like my most recent friendships as an adult, and just the things that I didn't necessarily like in the friendship. And it was so crazy because when I looked at the list and I saw all the different people, and these were different stages of my life, I saw literally the same things. And it was not until that moment that I realized, like, wow, I was dealing with the same type of person in variety of people. And that's when I knew that it was definitely spiritual, and it was not just a coincidence, or the fact that there's like, a ton of narcissists just in the world. It was definitely spiritual. That's when everything kind of, again, like I said, changed for me, on top of just the revelation and, just all the things that I've just been going through this year, consecrating and really being taking the Lord seriously. And so I just kind of had to face that hard truth, like I said. Um, and just realize that, like, other things that were also drawing me was that, one, I felt like an orphan. And that goes into just like my relationship with God, because like I said, when you deal with especially narcissism, but any kind of trauma, but even especially narcissism on a particular level, it definitely affects your relationship with God. And I didn't realize for a long time how much I felt like an orphan, and I didn't feel like I was a child of God. One, because, of just certain childhood things that were like said and done, and kind of being questioned a lot, and in my childhood, about being an actual Christian and all the things, which, that was from like religious spirits of other people and whatnot. But I think also, just like I said, just going through these cycles of abuse, and how much it stripped away at my self-esteem, and it stripped away at my belief system, and it stripped away at a lot of these things. I didn't realize how much that reflected towards God. And so I was really just feeling like I was an orphan. So I settled. And a lot of the times when you settle, like if you think about a real orphan in real life, there's a level of rejection and abandonment that comes attached, right, to that. And so a lot of the times, most orphans just want a home, right? They just want to be able to go to a home that, in their minds, they want the home that's loving and amazing and embracing. But in reality, it's just like anywhere but being in an orphanage, right? And so I felt like, spiritually, I just felt like an orphan, and so I just settled. So even though, like I said, there was a part of me with like dealing with narcissists in friendships and stuff like that, that I just was frustrated with, and I knew that I didn't want, because I knew it was abusive. There was the other part that, like I said, either was drawn by the pride and just my lust for material things, but also, just like I said, there was a comfortability and there was a familiarity in it, that I settled. So I was like, I already know kind of how to maneuver in this space of a narcissist. I know how to maneuver spiritually in this. And so I just settled, because it was like, I would rather that than really not have friends, or not have relationships, or just not be alone, right? And so there was that hard truth I had to face. The other hard truth was that I cared more about success and fitting in. I think that stems from, coming out of a Jamaican household. That's a thing with like success and money and being rich and all these things. So culturally, you have that aspect. But then I think, like I said, just my household, and just the belief systems that I came out of, where it's like, if you don't have degrees, and you don't have certain statuses, or you don't have a level of amount of money or success, it's like you're not ambitious, you're lazy, you're, all the things that are negative. I think that shaped my thought process, that shaped my belief system. So I had this, this desire to be successful and to fit in with successful people, because I just was like, I have to. My identity comes from that. Like, I wouldn't be anybody, or I wouldn't be viewed as a positive, good person, quote unquote, if I didn't have those things. And so that was a hard truth I also had to face. And then another one was, I just thought that people would change, and that I was overthinking. So again, here's this second guessing and double mindedness that played in, right? Like, I just was like, maybe these people just need a level of love and commitment from somebody, or loyalty, that will change them. And so they won't be, so self centered, and so, like, into themselves. Or that maybe I was just overthinking it, because again, I've come out of that in such an extensive, intensive way that I just thought everybody, the moment somebody was self centered, the moment somebody had a quality, I'm automatically painting them a narcissist. And maybe they're not. They just might have one quality, right? Because again, the narcissist is an encompassment of a variety of things. And so I was also thinking maybe I'm just overthinking it and I just need to stay and give it time. And maybe over time I'll see like, see, it's just like you're distrusting people. It's just you're second guessing about something. And so those were like hard truths I had to realize. And in those things, I definitely wasted a lot of time because they were very much narcissist and they were very much had various of these categories. And even just looking at just the cycles of abuse and seeing like how it was literally like, like I said, like a washing machine of carrying you through the motions emotionally and spiritually and mentally. I realized just how much I was blinded to just the realities of it. I was ignorant to what narcissism really was. Like I knew the gist of a narcissist, but I didn't know the in-depths, the types. I didn't know the tactics. I didn't know the spiritual implications. So this is why I'm like so adamant on doing these topics that aren't often talked about in the body, because I feel like sometimes our ignorance puts us in places and keeps us in places that are detrimental to us, right? And so when God often, either, switched like a relationship or told me to leave or allowed it to not work out, a lot of the times I was mad at him because I was just like, why? Like, I just maybe didn't give it enough time. Maybe it was me. And maybe it's like, maybe I'm just not the one that's likable. Maybe I'm not lovable. Maybe I'm not cool enough. Maybe I'm too boring for a lot of people. Or maybe I'm not like, the one that's like, successful enough. Like, I'm in this gray area where it's like I'm definitely, not down here, but I'm definitely not up here. So it was like so many different things that I was just kind of like putting at me as targets that, again, like I said, just kind of broke down just my view of self as well. And also my view of God. Like, God, do you even love me? Because you're just one allowing these people to come into my life and you're not helping me out here. But also it's just not looking like I'm getting nothing better. So it's like, so why do you keep not making it work? Why do you keep telling me to leave? Why do you, keep stripping it away? And so it's not until now, especially this year, that I realized like, yeah, a lot of the things that he was stripping from me, whether it was family, it was friends, it was relationships, work relationships, it was for my protection. It was for my good. It was for my safety because I needed a level of revelation to really see things for what they were and to see things in a magnitude of a way that really allowed me to be like, whoa, what was I doing? And not just about others, not just about them, but also again about me, like seeing what was in me that was drawing this, what was in me that was making me feel okay to settle with this. And so, yeah, so it was a lot of pruning that he did this year, especially. And just over the last 10 years in the wilderness, I just feel like there was just a lot of things that God really just kind of like took me through, taught me through, shaped me through. And so, yeah, so now that I can sit here and be like, I'm not only just blaming the narcissist, but I'm taking accountability for the things that I've allowed to attract them and to settle with them. That's the key to no longer going through that same cycle. So there comes a point where we have to hold ourselves accountable, even if it's in the smallest way. Because if you only blame others, you're never going to solve the problem. Because a lot of the times, the outside factors are just small versions of the play. There's a lot of inside stuff that is actually drawing those things, that are actually desiring those things, or that are actually condoning those things. And so we got to always look inward. We got to always go to the Lord. We got to always pray. We got to fast. We got to ask Him to show us the things in our hearts that actually are, causing us to do the outward things that's affecting us and killing us. And so, yeah, so it's so important to always start within, regardless of whether you know someone is a narcissist or not. Like I said, you pray about it, you distance yourself, but work on you. Don't ever just walk away from a narcissist and say, okay, I've left that narcissist, now I'm good. It's like, no, when you leave or you distance yourself, make sure that you're working on yourself. Because if you don't work on yourself, I best believe there's just another narcissist waiting to come and fill that space. And trust me, I've been through my cycles. And they have this saying, someone says, that a narcissist is the reward for your idolatry. And that's the thing that I realized was the main reason why I kept going through with them, right? Because again, the idolatry in me at that time was the success, the materials, the pride. And you can be your own idol. Don't think that it's only material things. Like if you have pride, you're your idol, right? So pride is your idol. The material things, the pride of life, things out there, the world, the success, the accolades, those things can become your idols. Because if you can never put it down, or if especially if they come before God, those are your idols. And so when the person said that, that's the saying I always keep in my head. I was like, yeah, that's definitely something I just keep as a reminder. Like, if you don't want a narcissist, take away your idols. And so, like I said, you have to definitely do more introspection, prayer, really just consecrating yourself, because trust me, like I said, all of this is spiritual. And so when you look at the spiritual component to it, then you realize that that's the only way that you can actually overcome it and kill it. And so yeah, so those were like the hard truths that I had to really like, learn. And like I said, the level of connectivity really came from familiar spirits that dealt with the generational foundations of my bloodline. So once God revealed a lot of like my bloodline stuff to me in like this year, I had an eye-opening experience of just how detrimental and how crazy it was. And just seeing like the familiar spirits, if you don't know what those are pretty much just like demonic spirits that's assigned to every bloodline. And they're just pretty much influencers to keep the bloodline, whatever those issues or sins or consequence iniquities are, they're just there to really monitor to keep it flowing. So if you dealt with alcoholism in your bloodline, you're going to have familiar spirits that's going to always try to make sure that you're keeping that going within generations upon generations upon generations. So they're pretty much like management to make sure that you're continuing on the generational things, the generational consequences or curses, or however you want to call it. So that's what a familiar spirit is. And so I just believe that my own idolatry put me in the path. And so, like I said, it was self, success, love, relationships. Even relationships was an idol. I think that's something that I had to come to a conclusion with, especially this year. And we live in just such a time, especially in social media, where friendships and relationships are idols constantly on social media. You got like, what do they call it? Relationship goals and, friendship goals, and everything is a goal practically. But really and truly, if you take out that goal, you just put idol. And it's like relationship idol, friendship idol, lifestyle idol, whatever you want to put it, it's an idol. And so if we're not careful, we fall into making things idols without realizing. And when you can't be content with your life because you see a relationship or a friendship or, somebody with a house or whatever, um, and you're comparing now because now you're like, man, like I want friendships like that. And granted, desiring friendship, desiring relationships is human, right? God built us for us to not be alone. He built us for us to have that fellowship and love and nurture. But when you start making it an idol where you can't be content with where you are in whatever season you're in, because you see social media or because you see other people with certain things, because they've made it a goal, even some people without even making it a goal, when you see people just constantly, marketing a certain thing, it creates an idol in your heart and you don't realize it. So when you find yourself attached to narcissists or people who are so self-centered, is because you've made idols in yourself and you didn't even realize that you've put idols in your heart. And so, like I said, it's so important for us to do introspection, to really pray, to seek the Lord, to really take out any pride at even its smallest level. God hates it. So taking that out and just really taking out any idols you've made. You can make love an idol. Like so many things can be an idol. So like making sure that you're really looking within yourself and saying, am I idolizing this thing? Or is it just a desire that, again, I can wait on the Lord to send me? But when it's an idol, it's like you don't realize how much you're just low key programmed to want to have that thing. And if you're not seeking the Lord on it and you're not waiting on his time or his divinity, then you're really doing this yourself. And there's a form of rebellion and disobedience that comes hand in hand with that, because if God tells you the opposite, or to tell you to do something the opposite, or he tells you no, or he tells you wait, more than likely when you have an idol, there's an innate thing in you to be self-willed. So then you become rebellious and you become disobedient because you're like, I desire that and I want that. And I want that more than you, God. So at the end of the day, you go after that thing. And again, regardless of what it is, anything outside of God, anything that is above God that takes its place is an idol. And so that's the thing that I had to really come to the conclusion of, come to the reality of, and that really helped set me free in so many ways. And even now, like as I'm fostering new relationships and new friendships, I'm being very conscious of the level of pour in that I do, the level of like infiltrating myself to not making it an idol, because again, you have to know your proclivities. And although, you've gone through consecration and you've gone through a level of, revelation, and you've gone through deliverance and you've gone through certain things, you got to still be mindful, because again, the enemy has a way of just drawing you back to the thing you just came out of. So you got to be careful not to go back to it. So I'm always intentional and mindful of just making sure I'm not putting these things as idols. So I make sure that, can I withdraw myself for a moment? Can I focus on only what God wants and not this thing for a moment? Because again, you don't want to make these things your idols. I wanted to actually mention Colossians 3:5 as it relates to this. And Colossians 3:5 says, to put to death, therefore, whatever belongs to your earthly nature: sexual immorality, impurity, lust, evil desires, and greed, which is idolatry. And so this is a verse that we should just definitely marinate on. Of course, you read Colossians 3 just for all context, the verses before and after. But just seeing that what he says is like your earthly nature, your flesh. These are things that your flesh desires, but making sure that you put to death your flesh. This is why we have to die to our flesh daily. And like I said, that's why I'm even more adamant and intentional and cautious on making sure that I'm not making things an idol. Because again, your fleshly desires of love and affection and attention and these things are okay on a minimal level. But when it starts to grow, or when it starts to become more than it needs to be, this is where you have real issues. And so that's why it's like, yeah, you got to die to your flesh daily. And how do you do that? Consecration, reading your word, staying in the Lord's presence, praying, fasting. So these are just ways that you just have to, these are things that's a lifestyle of dying to your flesh. That's why it's daily. Like it's a lifestyle. So we have to be reading our word daily to renew our minds, right? We have to be reading our word to know God. We have to be praying and having devotional time with the Lord to really have that relationship, for the Holy Spirit to further create fruits of the Spirit, right? And not fruits of the unholy Spirit. And so like these are all the things that are a lifestyle that we have to make sure that we're dedicated to all the time. And so like I said, this just goes into how did I change it? How did I, start to, once I realized that, okay, these are narcissists that I'm dealing with just moment after moment. And then also, these are the reasons why they're being drawn to me and I'm drawn to them. And so how did I change it? Just like I just was mentioning. Consecration was something that I definitely had to go through when I started taking my life serious with the Lord this year, at the top of this year. Like there were so many things I had to throw away, so many things I had to get rid of, so many people that God wanted me to walk away from, family, friends, opportunities, business relationships, and it's been just a stripping, and sometimes it feels like, man, you're just losing after losing after losing after losing with no gain. But this is all part of the consecration and purification of it all, because there's a lot of things you got to strip off, because again, your belief system is key to your faith and your belief in God and just in everything. And so you got to strip away all those things for the heart, the soul, the mind, And so, like, I had to go through consecration, deliverance, which I went through self deliverance. And that's literally like fasting and praying, like, for months to like for to break generational things, to break off things that, like I said, the pride in me, the lust of material things and the pride of life, and all the things that I just realized, like manipulation and all the things that I just realized that were a part of me that I had in me. Again, the honesty and writing down my own impurities and taking accountability. Like, I made lists of things that I saw within myself that I discovered through God's revelation. Things that he pointed out about my heart, wrote them down and just took accountability, prayed over them, and just repented. Like, repentance is so key. I had to repent for all of those things. Again, it goes back to prayer. Prayer, that's the core of just talking with the Lord, right? Then there's reading of the word, like I said, that's the shaping your mind, that's the renewing of your mind, and that's also gaining your identity in Christ, which I had to build my identity in Christ, because again, I was building my identity on people and things and all of this stuff and never Christ. And so I had to build my identity on Christ, and that can only happen through the word, because you need to know his character, you need to know what Christ expects us to be. And then you also just need to be affirmed through the words. There's some just affirmations that the Father and that Jesus gives us to let us know that we are children of God, that he does love us, that he has grace and mercy over us, that he wants us to succeed, he wants us to prosper, like all of these things as well. And then again, like I said, killing the idols. Like, I had to go through isolation, like I said before. Like, I had to let go of so much family and friends. Felt like Abraham. Had to literally leave my land, literally, and go off into a land that he promised, and I have no clue. But that's what I literally had to do. I had to put down my business organization suite to a degree, where he didn't want me to focus solely on that anymore. He wanted me to do this now. This is like the thing that he's called me to in this season. So I had to put down that in a lot of ways, with like opportunities that I had that were pending, um other things that were pending, even the way that I made income with Organs VT, like he put that down. I had to put down material things. There were a lot of things that he was just showing me, again, because of the lust of for material things. I stopped buying a lot of like major designer stuff. Like, I still have some that I really like, but I just changed my view on what do I see as that looks good. I don't need every designer label out there. Actually, I now want the opposite. Like, I saw this sweater that's so awesome that I get from Shein. Like, now it's like Shein and, more of the more affordable things that I'm realizing now, that like I don't need a label to look good. All I need is to have a style. Like, if I got a style and the creativity, I can make something that's like $20 look amazing, right? So do I need a Louis Vuitton? Do I need a Prada? Do I need any of these stuff to say that I have money? Because a lot of the times when we're wearing nothing but labels, worse than you see people from head to toe, it's just to feel validated. It's just to say that I have status or that I have money that you can kind of guess in my bank account. Although you can't, because people can use credit cards, people can scam. There's so many this it is not even real life sometimes, guys. And I've had to learn that myself, right? Because I thought, oh man, like you must got it. Like, you got all of these designer stuff, you got all of these things. And it's like, no, people can be taking a rent buying this stuff. People can be scamming and buying this stuff. People can be literally borrowing money or borrowing these things. Like, there's just so many reasons. Everybody that has all these nice things, houses and all this stuff, is not all from great gain. The Bible tells us this. There's a lot of people that do wicked things to get the things that they have. And so this is why Jesus even spoke about like not being so bent up on wealth, not being so bent up on getting our treasures in on the earth. We're supposed to be bent up on getting our treasures in heaven, because all this stuff is vanity. We know Solomon talked about that in Ecclesiastes, like nothing but vanity. And he was the wisest and had so many things. He dang near had how many wives? Like, he went through it in terms of having the level of success. And he said it's all vanity. Like, literally, it means nothing. And even Jesus told us he showed us just how much it means nothing, because he said, yo, the greatest man sells all his possessions and follows me. So even Jesus is like, yo, you can have all of these things, you can have all of this material stuff, but really the greatest man leaves all of that behind, gives it to the poor, and then comes and follows me. So really and truly, it's like we can accumulate all of these things, but what is it really doing for us? Is it really helping us? Are you really getting all this stuff to help others? Like all the things that we buy, yes, you can like nice things and have nice things, but it's like if all your life is encompassed on what you have and you've never helped a poor person, you've never helped anybody else, it's like, is it really doing you good? Because God is not pleased. You know what I mean? And so I think that's the thing I've had to just realize when I saw just how much he was just making me put down, and he just really renewed my mind and showed me truth on stuff. Like when you just realize how much stuff is vanity, you say to yourself, like, what was I striving for? Like, how am I really being Christ-like in this moment? Just constantly wanting things. And I was one of those people that I hoarded things. Like I shopped constantly, like I literally spent. Like I'm talking about like hoarding so much that you don't even wear things, you don't use things. It was just a matter, again, it was a feeding that I was doing, looking for the void to fill all voids that I've had of rejection and abandonment and low self-esteem and needed validation and needing things, again, lust of material stuff and pride of life and all these things, because I felt low about myself. I felt like I didn't have value. And so I thought these things gave me value. And then you rock the Louis Vuitton and then you put it down and realize, well, man, it was just for a moment. What did it do? Like once I put that Louis Vuitton down, I was back to feeling how I felt. Like it wasn't nothing that changed in the moment when you walk outside and it's like, yeah, you see me, I got a Louis Vuitton, cool. But then when I put it back in my closet, it's like, well, now here I am sitting back at point A, back to how I felt, right? And so I think when I've just gone through like just all the stripping in the last 10 years of the wilderness, and like going through so much stripping to the point of having nothing, like being on the system, like literally being on the system, like having no food, like having no money for rent, having no money for bills, like rent that was so high that like it was like tens of thousands of dollars. Like literally going through the stripping in the last 10 years in the wilderness taught me so much coming out now on the other side. Like coming out now and seeing the blessings and seeing all the blessings that are to come that he's shown me and that he's telling me, and just seeing just how much I have a different desire for it now. Like the money that I'll get, I won't use it the way that I once did back then. Like I'm now more concerned with helping other people in any way that I can, whether that's like helping people with groceries, whether that's like giving to charities that I know are really giving to people, like, making sure, like, just looking at people and saying, like, wow, if there's homeless people, like, caring about that now. Like, not even just about building wealth. Yeah, you want to build wealth because I have a child and you have generations after you. It's not just me. If it was just me, or if it's just me and my husband, it'd be one thing. But it's like, yeah, you have a child, so you want generational wealth, right? But even in that, like, I'm trusting God on that. Like, I'm not even focusing on that because again, I'm realizing that God wants us to help other people. And the more that you help, he'll make sure you're good. He said he supplies all your needs according to his riches in Christ Jesus. And so therefore, if you have a need, he's going to provide it. So maybe not your want, but if you are in need, we've seen Paul literally have nothing. He literally was the epitome of how Jesus did with the disciples, nothing, but he was always provided for. Every time that he went into a new area, they always provided shelter, food, clothing. He didn't have to worry because literally it's like no matter where I go, what I do, regardless of my lack, because I know how to be abased and abound and I'm content and I'm not looking for all these extra things, God provides, and therefore I can do all things. So now when he tells me to go preach at Thessalonia or wherever else that he goes to, he's like, I already know, although I might not have no food right now, no shelter, no place to go, and I don't know what's going to happen. By faith, I'm moving because that's what God asked me to do. But I know when I get there, he's going to provide every last need. And so if we really had that level of faith today and not really be halfway in the world in terms of how the world does things, and really believed that God will really provide our need through people, through things, through opportunities, whatever, we wouldn't be chasing after the bag and chasing after success and chasing after wealth and chasing after materials the way that we do in the church. But we've gotten so focused again on the world And the Bible tells us of it, don't be of the world. But we've gotten so in liking to the world because again, that lust, the lust of the eyes, the pride of life, we got hooked on that. And we don't even see it, right? There's so much pride and so much of the spirit of Jezebel and so much of the lust that's rampant in the church. And we don't even see it because we equate every material thing to blessing. The world does that every time. You go up there, you see awards, they're like, yes, I won this award, thank God. It's a blessing from God, and we've adopted that same thing in the church. So it's like you have a mega church, or you have this, or you have that, or you have this materials, or your life you went from the bottom to the top. Oh, it's God. And it's like, God ain't the only one in the business of blessing. Matter of fact, I actually am going to do an episode on what it really means to be blessed because Jesus spoke about that in Matthew 5. And it's the total opposite of what we think. But yeah, when it comes to material worldly things, God ain't in the business of just blessing us on that. Matter of fact, he want those he blessed, like I said, in like Joseph, David, those folks, he did that so that they can use those things to help other people. It wasn't even for themselves. Yes, did they enjoy those things? Yes. Did they have a level of they get to have those things for themselves? Sure. But it was definitely to help other people. And so when we look at it, we think about it in the church and we think, oh boy, everything is a blessing. Everything is a blessing from God because it's worldly stuff. It's like, nah, the enemy, the devil, is the prince of this world. Do you not think he dang near tempted Jesus with all the things, power, worldly possessions, all the stuff? So why do you not think that the materials that you might have might be from him? Why do you not think the success you might have might be from him? Because if it's not centered on Christ, best believe that is more than likely the devil, because he's giving you these things to continue to condone you into doing the same things that you're doing. Because if it's not about Christ, trust me, he's all for it, because the point is to hook us in. So again, that's why he gives us the pride of life and he gives us the lust of the eyes, because he wants us to continue to be hooked in to wanting those things. Because again, we are flesh, and a lot of the times, if we're operating under flesh and not spirit, we're going to be drawn to those things. So yes, it's just like I was saying in another episode about the dog and Pavlov, when it's like you train a dog with a bell and they know that every time that you ring that bell, that's it's dinner time. It's the same way the enemy works. He says, you want that in your heart? You really want that pride of life. You really want that power. You really want that status. You really want those materials. I'm going to definitely give it to you. And I'm going to continue to do it. And every time you do it, you say, oh man, this is God. This is blessings. And I'm going to continue to just make you be deceived into thinking that you're doing the work of the Lord, right? Not knowing that you're not doing it. But guess what? I'm rewarding you with material things so that you can think that that is the case. So then you wonder why, when Jesus says, there's going to be some that's going to come and say, Lord, Lord, I did all these things in your names. And he's going to say, depart from me, you workers of iniquity. Because guess what? You believed you were doing it in the name of the Lord, but you weren't, because it was not aligned to his word. And if you're not doing anything aligned to his word, best believe that you're working for the enemy, because the enemy is blessing you so that you could continue to do exactly what he wants you to do and be deceived while you're in it. And that's the worst kind, I think, for me, where it's like you're in the church and you're not even of the church. That is going to be the worst kind of deception. It's best you be in the world and at least you know where you're at and you know exactly where you're going to be. But the worst kind, I think, is for us to be in the church and then to hear that depart from me. I don't know. That is the greatest, fear of being like, you are walking up confidently saying, yes, Lord, I'm about to get in and make it in. And then he turns around and says, depart. That's the worst. It's best you would have put your efforts in the world than to be deceived in the church and think that you're doing of the Lord his work and you're really not. And it's really the enemy that was blessing you this whole time, quote unquote, and you thinking it's God because you've equated God's blessings only to materials. Some of his blessings can be material because he's God. He creates it. So he's never going to just allow the enemy to be the only one that can give you materials, of course. But if you look at, again, like I said, the people in the Bible that he blessed materialistically, they always was there to help others. All those material things, Joseph, his position, the things he had was to bless the very brothers that threw him in the pit. It was to bless the people his people from his land that came to Egypt for help. Like God put him in that position because he knew that he can trust him because of his heart, because his heart was after the Lord, for him to actually turn around and help his people, even those people that actually put him in a lot of the turmoil and the anguish that he was in the process. So we got to understand the reasonings as to why God gives us material blessings, not for our lives to be better, for us to be comfortable, and for us to be good. Like, it's for other people to think that God blesses us because we are in such lack, or because we are, we desire to be in a comfortable lifestyle. That is not biblical. And I think we just got to again, we have to be abreast to this truth, because like I said, this ties into the narcissism. And if you have found yourself in a cycle of narcissists, you have to come to the same hard truths I did. Like, what in you is really condoning this and drawing you to this, because it is spiritual. And again, the idolatry is the one thing that we don't like to talk about, but it is true. There is so much idolatry that we see in the church, that we face that we have as individuals. And again, God never dealt with idolatry with kindness. We've seen it in the Bible, even to his chosen people, the children of Israel. He reprimanded them, he punished them patiently, lovingly, but he punished them. Like, he doesn't deal with idolatry, because again, you're putting something else in his place. And so we just have to be very careful, very mindful, staying close to the Lord, making sure that we're really consecrating ourselves, that we're really walking this thing for real. Because like I said, it's going to be the worst kind of deception and the worst kind of like rejection, not for nothing, from Jesus, when you walk up thinking you're going to make it. And then he turns around and says, nah, I don't even know you. I never knew you. Like, that's like, whoa. So what was I doing? I was calling myself a Christian, a Christ follower. I was casting out demons. I was doing this. I was doing miracles, signs, and wonders. And man, none of it was even for him. The thing that I thought I was doing. And some people are doing that knowing it's not for him, but there's some that really believe it is, but not realizing that you're actually walking outside of his will, outside of who he is. And so again, we got to really just really have these hard truths, hard conversations, be honest with God, pray for real, in the sense of just being honest with God about everything and allowing him to heal us, to restore us, to redeem us, to deliver us from certain things. And really just again, like walking in holiness and righteousness. Like, we have to make that normal in the church. Like, we have to be righteous. We have to be repentant. We have to be holy. God is holy. Grace is not something that you sit and take advantage of. You can't just refuse to do a thing and then say grace is going to cover me. That's not how that works, because you're now taking advantage of grace. And Paul talks about that as well, right? And so we have to just be very mindful, guys. Like, we have to strive for righteousness and holiness. And again, when it comes to a narcissist or not, we just got to know that we have to do introspection. We have to do consecration. We have to pray. We got to be about the Lord for real. And so, yeah, so I know there's a lot of layers. But yeah, I definitely, like I said, this episode, I wanted it to be not just about learning about a narcissist, not just about blaming anybody that you might have encountered that have been a narcissist, but also taking accountability for any narcissist that you've drawn in your life, that you've kept in your life. All of the things. And so I really just hope that this helped you. I really hope that it allowed you to kind of see, just to really just think about, like, am I going through these things? Are these some of the things that might be the things that's drawing me to? And I just really hope that this kind of just opens up the further conversation within yourself, for you to pray and really seek the Lord, and for him to show you, like, what are some things in your heart that you got to kind of, get fixed. Yeah. So as I always do, I have a verse of the day that I like to end things off with. And this is good for like journaling, or just for you to just meditate on until we meet again. And today's verse of the day is going to, obviously, as I said, relate to this, Romans 12:2. And it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that you may prove what is good and acceptable and perfect will of God. Not being conformed to this world, not just in the materialistic side of it, or just our ambitions and those kind of things, but also just in terms of us as a person, right? Our hearts, our souls, our minds. We have to make sure that we're transformed and renewed in our minds by his word, but also, again, focusing on helping the poor, whether that's financially or the poor in spirit. Think more highly of others than ourselves. Having a selfless, sacrificial kind of love for everyone, not just family and friends. Not doing an eye for an eye, treating your enemies well, blessing them, matter of fact, praying for the people that use you. All of these things that the world says is weak or the world says we shouldn't do, that's what he wants us to do so that we're not conformed to the world. This is how we look differently from the world. So when we actually consecrate and we actually purify our hearts, the outward will reflect. It's not to say you can't have swag and you can't have style, but we won't see you as, needing as much validation as the world with like constantly dressing to impress, or you're always into vanity and it's always about a material thing, or it's always about an accolade, or it's always about there's a balance, right? And so when you've made these things your identity and you've made these things for validation purposes because out of insecurity or whatever it is, this is how we're conformed to the world. So we just got to make sure that we are exuding Christ-like qualities first and foremost, and that our lives are reflecting what we're teaching, preaching, and also reading. And so, like he said, we have to be doers of the word and not just hearers only. Yeah, so again, this is all proving that God's will is perfect, good, and acceptable, because again, he's holy, he is sovereign, and he is good. And so therefore his will is the same. And so when we don't conform and we work on ourselves and we make sure that we are Christ-like, we are proving who God is. We are proving what his will is. And so this is our whole point on this earth, is to prove that God is good. That is the whole point. We are proving that God is good. And this is why the enemy uses his tactics, because he's trying to prove that God is not good. And he's trying to prove that God is not sovereign. And he's trying to prove that God is not just. And so we on the side of God is proving that God is all of those things. And so thank you guys for watching and listening up until this part. I really pray that this has helped you. I pray that this further again draws out just thoughts and introspection and reflection just on your life, on others. And yeah, I just pray that this really just helps you. And if you really enjoyed this episode, or if, this episode has been super helpful to you, please don't forget to subscribe. And also don't forget to like and share this video or this episode with those who you think need it. All of the links I have in the description, which would be ways that you can connect with me on like Instagram, TikTok, and all of the things. If you would like to donate to, support this ministry, I have that as well in the description. And then I also have my website, scratcheverythingpodcast.com. If you want just a place where you can like read articles on like, again, daily devotionals and other things about Christ. I go in on certain things on like, am I covetous and all of these other things. You can definitely read that there. That's my blog site. And so I made one for the podcast. Those are all in the description in the bottom of this video. So you can just scroll through and see all of the important links there. And yeah, so thank you guys again. I truly appreciate you, and I cannot wait until next time. Love you.